A police dog was found inside a trash container, abandoned and injured. But what his partner did next will break your heart. Watch until the end and get ready for a story that will move you deeply. Subscribe to the channel and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss the next chapters of this real-life journey. The morning started like any other for Officer Jack Miller. The sun had barely risen over the industrial outskirts of Portland, Maine, casting long shadows across abandoned warehouses and empty lots. Jack checked his watch. 5:45 a.m. His shift had started 15 minutes ago, and as always, Ranger was already alert, his ears perked up, sniffing the crisp morning air. "Ready for patrol, buddy?" Jack asked, and Ranger responded with a soft woof, his tail wagging rhythmically against the patrol car door. At 42, Jack was a veteran K-9 handler with the Portland Police Department. His salt and pepper hair and the fine lines around his eyes told stories of sleepless nights and high-stakes operations. 20 years on the force had earned him respect, but it was his partnership with Ranger, a 4-year-old German Shepherd with intelligent eyes and unwavering loyalty, that gave him purpose. They made an exceptional team. Jack had trained Ranger himself from a pup, and their connection went beyond the standard handler-dog relationship. They communicated almost telepathically at times, understanding each other's signals with uncanny precision. The bond between them was the subject of admiration around the precinct. "Let's check the old Wilson Manufacturing District first," Jack said, starting the engine. The area had been abandoned for years, a maze of derelict buildings awaiting redevelopment that never seemed to come. It was a quiet part of their beat, but required regular patrols due to occasional reports of trespassers. The patrol car moved slowly along the perimeter of the old factory complex. The morning mist still clung to the ground, making the place look even more forgotten and isolated. Jack rolled down his window, allowing Ranger to catch any unusual scents. The dog sat alert in the passenger seat, his nose working overtime. "Something interesting?" Jack asked when Ranger's ears twitched forward. The dog gave a low whine that Jack recognized. There was something worth investigating. Jack pulled the car over and opened the door. "Show me," he commanded softly. Ranger jumped out and immediately began moving with purpose, his nose close to the ground, then lifting to catch air scents. Jack followed at a distance, allowing the dog to work, but keeping him in sight. The path took them between two large warehouses, through a narrow alley lined with overgrown weeds pushing through cracks in the concrete. Ranger moved confidently, stopping occasionally to confirm the scent trail before continuing. Jack followed, his hand resting casually on his holster, a habit born from years of experience. "Easy, boy," Jack murmured as Ranger's pace quickened. The alley opened into a small courtyard between buildings. Ranger paused at the corner, then turned to look back at Jack, as if seeking permission to continue. "Go ahead." Jack nodded, watching as Ranger disappeared around the corner. Jack expected to hear the familiar sound of paws returning after investigation. 1 minute passed, then 2. Silence stretched uncomfortably. "Ranger!" Jack called out, quickening his pace to reach the corner. "Ranger, come!" The courtyard was empty. Jack scanned the area, looking for any sign of his partner. There were several possible exits, another alley opposite, a partially open loading dock door to the left, and a broken fence on the right that led to yet another abandoned building. "Ranger!" Jack's voice echoed against the brick walls, returning to him with hollow emptiness. This wasn't like Ranger at all. The dog had never disobeyed a recall command, not once in their years together. Jack pulled out his radio. "Miller to dispatch. I'm at the old Wilson complex. My K-9 has gone missing during patrol, requesting assistance for search." The response came through with a crackle. "Copy that, Miller. Are you certain he's not just investigating something nearby?" "Negative. He's trained better than that. He wouldn't ignore a recall." "Understood. Officer Chen is nearby, redirecting him to your location." Jack didn't wait for backup. He began systematically checking each possible route Ranger might have taken, calling the dog's name, listening for any response. The silence that answered him was deafening. Officer Chen arrived 15 minutes later, finding Jack growing increasingly frustrated and concerned. "He just disappeared," Jack explained, his voice tight with worry. "1 minute he was here, the next, gone." "We'll find him," Chen assured him. Though his expression betrayed his concern, missing police dogs weren't a common occurrence, especially ones as well-trained as Ranger. They expanded the search, calling in additional officers. By noon, they had covered the entire Wilson complex without finding a single trace of Ranger. No fur caught on fences, no paw prints in the soft dirt. Nothing. It was as if the dog had simply vanished into thin air. Back at the precinct, Captain Sarah Donovan listened to Jack's recount with a furrowed brow. "We need to file this as missing department property," she said finally, her tone professional but sympathetic. She had risen through the ranks alongside Jack and understood his attachment to Ranger. "Property?" Jack repeated, his voice edged with disbelief. "Ranger isn't just equipment, Sarah." "You know what I mean, Jack. It's procedure." She sighed, pulling up a form on her computer. "We'll put out an alert. Every patrol will keep an eye out, but what? But I can't authorize a dedicated search team beyond today. We're stretched thin as it is with the downtown development project requiring additional security." Jack stared at her, incredulous. "Are you saying we just give up? That we just wait and hope someone spots him?" "I'm saying we follow protocol," Sarah replied firmly. "Look, Jack, I know what Ranger means to you, but he's a smart dog. There's a good chance he'll find his way back on his own." Jack knew better. Ranger wouldn't just wander off. Something had happened, something wrong, and his gut told him this was no ordinary disappearance. That night, unable to sleep, Jack sat at his kitchen table, surrounded by maps of the Wilson complex and the surrounding areas. His modest apartment felt emptier than ever without Ranger's presence. The dog's bed lay untouched in the corner of the living room, his favorite chew toy placed neatly beside it. Jack's phone rang, startling him from his thoughts. The caller ID showed it was Rebecca Foster, the precinct's forensic technician and one of the few people Jack considered a true friend. "Any news?" she asked without preamble. "Nothing," Jack replied, rubbing his tired eyes. "Sarah's treating it like he's a missing flashlight. Says we don't have the resources for a proper search." Rebecca was quiet for a moment. "That doesn't sound right. A trained police dog is a significant asset." "My thoughts exactly." Jack stared at the map spread before him. "Something feels off about this whole situation, Becca. Ranger doesn't just disappear. What are you thinking?" "I don't know yet, but I'm not waiting for the department to decide Ranger is worth finding. I'm going back out there tomorrow, with or without authorization." "You could get in trouble." "I don't care," Jack said firmly. "He wouldn't give up on me. I'm not giving up on him." After hanging up, Jack turned his attention back to the maps. He circled the spot where Ranger had disappeared and began drawing concentric rings outward, marking areas to search systematically. As the night deepened, his determination only grew stronger. Whatever had happened to Ranger, Jack would find him, and he would discover the truth behind this mysterious disappearance, no matter where it led or who might stand in his way. Outside, the wind picked up, whistling through the empty streets of Portland. Somewhere in the darkness, Ranger's fate remained unknown, a mystery waiting to be unraveled by the one person who refused to believe that their story together had reached its end. Dawn broke over Portland with a reddish hue that sailors often warned about. Jack had barely slept, his mind racing with possibilities, each scenario more concerning than the last. He called in sick for the first time in 3 years, knowing Sarah wouldn't approve of his unsanctioned search. The industrial zone looked different in the early morning light. Jack parked his personal truck, a weathered Ford that had seen better days, at the entrance to the Wilson complex and began his methodical search. He carried Ranger's favorite training toy, a worn tennis ball that still smelled strongly of the dog, hoping it might help lure him if he was hiding or injured somewhere. Hours passed with no results. Jack expanded his search beyond the immediate area where Ranger had disappeared, checking every building, every alley, and every corner of the complex. By mid-afternoon, exhaustion began setting in, but his determination remained unshaken. His phone buzzed. Rebecca. "Any luck?" she asked when he answered. "Nothing yet," Jack replied, wiping sweat from his brow. The day had grown unexpectedly warm. "I've covered most of the complex. I'm starting to think I need to look elsewhere." "I might have something that could help," Rebecca said, her voice dropping to a near whisper, "but I can't talk about it over the phone. Can you meet me at Sullivan's in half an hour?" Sullivan's was a small diner 3 blocks from the precinct, popular with off-duty officers, but quiet enough for private conversations. Jack agreed, curiosity piqued by Rebecca's secretive tone. The diner was nearly empty when Jack arrived. Rebecca sat in a corner booth, a manila folder on the table in front of her, nervously tapping her fingernails against her coffee mug. She wasn't in uniform. Instead, she wore casual clothes and dark sunglasses, despite being indoors. "You look like you're in a spy movie," Jack commented as he slid into the booth across from her. Rebecca didn't smile. "This isn't funny, Jack." She pushed the folder toward him. "I shouldn't have accessed this. If anyone finds out, I could lose my job." Jack opened the folder to find printouts of surveillance footage. "Where did you get these?" "There's a traffic camera at the corner of Wilson Street and Harbor Drive. It's positioned to catch the intersection, but it also captures part of the side entrance to the complex." She pointed to a timestamp on one of the images. "This was taken yesterday morning, about 20 minutes after you reported Ranger missing." Jack studied the grainy black and white image. A nondescript white van was parked halfway into the frame, its rear doors open. The angle made it impossible to see who was loading something into the van, but the timing was suspicious. "There's more," Rebecca said, flipping to the next image. "This is the same van leaving 10 minutes later. I ran the plates. They're registered to a waste management company called Eastern Disposal Services." "Garbage collectors?" Rebecca nodded. "They have a contract with the city to handle waste removal from municipal buildings and some industrial zones, including the Wilson complex." Jack's mind raced, connecting dots. "You think someone took Ranger and used a garbage truck to transport him?" "I'm not saying that," Rebecca replied cautiously, "but the timing is convenient, and look at this." She pointed to the last image, which showed a close-up of the van. A barely visible logo on the side showed a stylized EDS with the tagline, "Cleaning up Maine's Future." "They have a processing center on the outskirts of town, near the old paper mill," she continued. "It's where they sort recyclables and prepare waste for the landfill." Jack closed the folder, his jaw tight with determination. "That's my next stop." "Jack," Rebecca placed her hand on his arm. "Be careful. If someone deliberately took Ranger, there's more going on here than a lost dog. Why would anyone want to take a police K9? The question hung between them, unanswered but troubling. Eastern Disposal Services Processing Center was a sprawling facility surrounded by a high chain-link fence. The smell hit Jack before he even parked. The unmistakable stench of garbage, baking in the afternoon sun. He circled the perimeter, looking for a way in that wouldn't attract attention. A security booth guarded the main entrance, but the guard seemed more interested in his phone than in watching for intruders. Near the back of the property, Jack found what he was looking for. A section of fence, partially obscured by overgrown bushes, with a small gap where it had been cut and poorly repaired. Once inside, Jack moved carefully between rows of industrial Dumpsters and stacks of flattened cardboard. Workers operated machinery nearby, sorting through conveyor belts of waste, but none seemed to notice him. He made his way toward a line of white vans, similar to the one in Rebecca's photos. Most were empty, their rear doors open, contents already unloaded. But one van, parked slightly apart from the others, had its doors closed. Heart pounding, Jack approached it, looking around to ensure no one was watching. The van was locked, but through the windows Jack could see it was empty. Disappointment washed over him. Had he misinterpreted the evidence? Was this entire theory wrong? A noise caught his attention, faint but distinctive. A bark, muffled and distant, but one he would recognize anywhere. Ranger. The sound seemed to come from a small outbuilding near the edge of the property. Jack moved toward it, careful to stay out of sight of the workers. The building looked like a storage shed, with a padlock securing its door. Jack circled around, finding a small window on the backside. Standing on tiptoe, he peered inside and his heart leaped. There was Ranger, dirty and tired-looking, but very much alive, still wearing his police vest. "Hey, boy," Jack whispered, pressing his fingers against the glass. Ranger's head shot up, ears forward, recognizing Jack's voice immediately. The dog whined and pawed at the floor, unable to reach the window. Jack needed to get inside. The padlock was heavy-duty, not something he could break easily without tools. He returned to his truck, retrieving a crowbar from his emergency kit, then made his way back to the shed. The lock was stubborn, but Jack's determination was stronger. After several tense minutes, the hasp finally gave way with a metallic groan. Jack slipped inside, closing the door behind him. Ranger bounded toward him, nearly knocking him over in his excitement. Jack knelt, burying his face in the dog's fur, relief washing over him in waves. "I thought I'd lost you," he murmured, checking Ranger for injuries. The dog seemed unharmed, just dirty and dehydrated. "Let's get you out of here." As Jack prepared to leave, something caught his eye. Ranger's vest seemed slightly different. The stitching along one side was fresher than the rest, as if it had been recently altered. Curious, Jack ran his fingers along the seam and felt something unusual, a small bump beneath the fabric. "What's this, boy?" he asked quietly, examining the vest more closely. With careful fingers, he located a hidden pocket that shouldn't have been there, sewn into the lining of the vest. Inside was a small object about the size of a thumbnail. Some kind of data, storage device. Jack stared at it, confusion and concern mingling in his mind. Why would someone plant this on Ranger's vest? And more importantly, who had done it? The sound of voices outside snapped Jack back to the present situation. Someone was approaching the shed. Quickly, he pocketed the device and prepared to make his escape with Ranger. "Ready to go home, buddy?" he whispered. Ranger wagged his tail in response, ready, as always, to follow his partner. Jack cracked the door open slightly, peering out to assess the situation. Two workers were walking toward the shed, deep in conversation. He waited until they passed, then slipped out with Ranger close at his heel. Moving stealthily through the maze of containers and equipment, they made their way back to the gap in the fence. Ranger went through first, with Jack following quickly behind. Minutes later, they were in Jack's truck, driving away from the facility, the mysterious device secure in Jack's pocket. As Portland's skyline came into view, Jack glanced at Ranger, sitting in the passenger seat, looking out the window as if nothing unusual had happened. But Jack knew better. Something very unusual had happened, and the small device in his pocket might hold the answers. He couldn't go back to his apartment. That would be the first place anyone would look if they discovered Ranger was missing. And he couldn't go to the precinct either, not with the questions swirling in his mind about who might be involved in this situation. There was only one person he trusted right now, Rebecca. Jack pulled over and called her. "I found him," he said simply when she answered. "Thank God," Rebecca breathed. "Is he okay?" He seems fine, but Becca, there's something else. Jack hesitated, unsure how much to say over the phone. I found something unusual. I need a safe place to stay tonight, and I need your help with something. My cousin has a cabin near Sebago Lake. No one's using it right now. She paused. Jack, what's going on? I'm not sure yet, he replied honestly, but someone went to a lot of trouble to take Ranger and hide something on him. I need to find out what and why. As Jack ended the call and pulled back onto the road, Ranger rested his head on Jack's thigh, a familiar gesture of trust. Jack scratched behind the dog's ears, a knot forming in his stomach. Whoever had taken Ranger had likely never intended for the dog to be found. The fact that he'd managed to locate him felt like luck, or perhaps a trap. Either way, Jack was now involved in something much bigger than a missing dog. And as the city faded behind them and the road to Sebago Lake stretched ahead, he couldn't shake the feeling that finding Ranger was just the beginning of a much more dangerous journey. Rebecca's cousin's cabin was exactly what Jack needed. Secluded, comfortable, and most importantly, off the grid. Located at the end of a winding dirt road, surrounded by pine trees, and overlooking the serene waters of Sebago Lake, it offered the perfect refuge. Rebecca arrived an hour after Jack, carrying grocery bags and a laptop. You look terrible, she said as Jack opened the door. Ranger bounded over to greet her, seemingly recovered from his ordeal. Nice to see you too, Jack replied with a tired smile, helping her with the bags. Thanks for coming. Inside, they settled at the rustic wooden dining table. Ranger lay at Jack's feet, unwilling to be more than a few inches away from his partner since their reunion. So, Rebecca said, unpacking sandwiches and bottled water. Show me what you found. Jack placed the small device on the table between them. It was black, smaller than a USB drive with no visible markings. It was sewn into Ranger's vest. Someone altered it recently. The stitching was different. Rebecca examined it carefully without touching it. This isn't standard issue. It's not anything I recognize from our equipment. Can you figure out what's on it? Rebecca hesitated. Maybe. But Jack, if this is what I think it is, some kind of unauthorized surveillance or data storage, accessing it could be risky. We don't know who put it there or what it contains. We need to know, Jack insisted. Ranger was taken for a reason. This might tell us why. Rebecca sighed but nodded, pulling out her laptop. I brought some equipment that might help, but first, tell me exactly what happened at Eastern Disposal. As Rebecca set up her computer, Jack recounted finding Ranger in the shed. The whole thing feels wrong, he concluded. Why take a police dog, plant something on him, and then just leave him in a storage shed? It doesn't make sense. Unless they never intended to keep him, Rebecca mused, connecting a small device to her laptop. Maybe they just needed access to his vest long enough to plant this, then plan to release him somewhere he'd eventually be found. But why? That's what we're going to find out. She carefully inserted the mysterious device into her adapter. This is an encrypted flash drive, military grade by the looks of it. It'll take some work to access whatever's on it. As Rebecca worked her digital magic, Jack paced the cabin, occasionally looking out at the lake through the large windows. The sun was setting, casting golden light across the water, a beautiful scene that contrasted sharply with the tension inside. Jack, Rebecca's voice was tight with concern. You need to see this. On her screen was a series of files, surveillance photos, GPS coordinates, and most disturbing of all, internal police reports that were never supposed to leave the department servers. These are all from the Jefferson case, Jack said, leaning closer to examine the files. Clay Jefferson was a local businessman under investigation for suspicious real estate dealings, but the case had been suddenly closed 3 months ago with no explanation. Not just Jefferson, Rebecca scrolled through more files. Donovan, Harper, Westlake, all major investigations that were mysteriously shut down over the past year. Jack felt his blood run cold. Someone's been collecting evidence of cases being buried and using Ranger as a courier. Rebecca finished his thought. Think about it. Who would suspect a K-9 of carrying classified data? The vest goes with him everywhere. It's actually brilliant. But who? Jack asked, his mind racing through possibilities. Who would have access to both these files and to Ranger? They looked at each other, the same realization dawning simultaneously. It has to be someone inside the department, Rebecca said quietly. High-ranking too, Jack added. These files are restricted access. Rebecca continued exploring the contents of the drive, her expression growing more troubled with each discovery. There's more here, Jack. Financial records, offshore accounts. Someone's been documenting corruption within the department, showing how these cases connect to bribes received by... She trailed off, her face paling. By who? Jack demanded. Rebecca turned the screen toward him. There, in clear detail, was evidence of payments made to several high-ranking officers in their department, including Chief Thomas Wilson. This can't be right, Jack said, though the evidence before him was compelling. Chief Wilson had led the department for 15 years, his reputation for integrity unquestioned. Why would the chief be involved in something like this? Money is usually a good motivator, Rebecca said grimly. According to this, he's received over $2 million in the past 3 years. The implications were staggering. If the chief was corrupt, how far did it extend? Who else was involved? And most importantly, for their immediate concern, who had compiled this evidence and used Ranger to transport it? There's something else, Rebecca said, opening another folder on the drive. Whoever collected this information left a message. She clicked on a text file simply labeled "Read Me." The message was brief but clear. If you're reading this, something has gone wrong. This evidence was meant to reach federal authorities directly. Trust no one within the department. The corruption runs deeper than you can imagine. Ranger was chosen because he could move freely without suspicion. I'm sorry for involving him, but there was no other way. Be careful. They will do anything to prevent this information from getting out. The message was unsigned. Someone in the department is trying to expose the corruption from within, Jack said slowly, processing this revelation. And they were using Ranger to smuggle the evidence out, Rebecca added, but something went wrong. The question is, what? Jack stood up, running a hand through his hair in frustration. And who planted this? Who was trying to get this evidence out? Rebecca was about to respond when her phone buzzed. She checked it, her expression shifting to alarm. It's the precinct. There's an APB out for you, Jack. What? Why? They're saying you assaulted a security guard at Eastern Disposal and stole property. They've classified Ranger as stolen police equipment. Jack's mind raced. That's impossible. I didn't see any security guards, let alone assault one. They're setting you up, Rebecca said, shutting down her laptop. They must have realized Ranger is missing from the shed. They're trying to discredit you before you can do anything with what you've found. Jack looked at Ranger, who gazed back with trusting eyes, unaware of the storm surrounding them. What do we do now? We need someone we can trust, Rebecca said, already packing up her equipment. Someone outside the department who can take this evidence to the right people. I might know someone, Jack said after a moment's thought. Nathan Reeves, an old friend from the academy. He left the force years ago, joined the FBI. Last I heard, he was working out of their Boston office. Can you trust him? Jack nodded. With my life. Make the call, Rebecca said, but not from your phone. They might be tracking it. Jack used the landline in the cabin to reach out to his old friend. The conversation was brief, cautious, with just enough information shared to convey the seriousness of the situation. Nathan agreed to meet them the following afternoon at a rest stop halfway between Portland and Boston. As night fell over the lake, Jack and Rebecca took turns keeping watch, the weight of their discovery hanging heavy in the air. Ranger stayed, close to Jack, as if sensing the danger surrounding them. "Who do you think did this?" Rebecca asked during her watch, as they sat on the cabin's small porch, the only sound the gentle lapping of lake water against the shore. "Someone with access to classified files and to the K9 unit," Jack reasoned. "That narrows it down, but not enough." "Could it be Lieutenant Parker?" Rebecca suggested. "He oversees all the major investigations." "Maybe," Jack conceded. "Or Detective Mercer. She's been vocal about her concerns over cases being closed, prematurely." They fell silent, the realization sinking in that they couldn't trust anyone they'd worked with for years. The corruption had poisoned everything, turning colleagues into potential threats. Morning brought a new challenge. Rebecca's phone buzzed with news alerts. Jack's face was plastered across local media, described as a rogue officer who had assaulted a security guard and stolen police property. The narrative was being carefully constructed to discredit him before he could reveal what he knew. "We need to move," Jack said, gathering their limited belongings. "It won't take them long to connect me to this cabin." As they prepared to leave, Jack noticed Ranger behaving strangely, standing rigid by the window, ears forward, a low growl building in his throat. "Someone's coming," Jack whispered, immediately on alert. Through the trees, they caught glimpses of a vehicle moving slowly along the dirt road leading to the cabin. It wasn't a police cruiser, it was a white van, identical to the ones from Eastern Disposal. "How did they find us?" Rebecca hissed, quickly shutting down her laptop. "It doesn't matter," Jack replied, leading them toward the back door. "We need to go. Now." They slipped out through the rear of the cabin, with Ranger leading the way into the dense woods surrounding the property. The forest provided cover as they made their way toward where they had parked their vehicles, hidden from the main road. Behind them, they heard the cabin door being forced open, followed by muffled voices. Jack couldn't make out words, but the tone was clear. Whoever had come wasn't there for a friendly visit. As they reached Rebecca's car, Jack made a quick decision. "Take Ranger with you," he instructed, handing her the leash. "I'll lead them. Away in my truck." "Jack, no, it's the only way," he insisted. "They're looking for me and Ranger together. Split us up, and you have a better chance of making it to Nathan." Rebecca wanted to argue, but knew he was right. "What about the drive?" Jack had kept it in his pocket since they discovered its contents. Now, he hesitated only briefly before pressing it into her hand. "Keep it safe. Get it to Nathan. He'll know what to do." Their eyes met, 1,000 words passing unspoken between them. Then Jack leaned in, surprising both of them with a quick but intense kiss. "Be careful," he whispered. "You too," she replied, her voice barely audible. With Ranger reluctantly following Rebecca to her car, Jack climbed into his truck. He started the engine, then deliberately revved it loudly, hoping to draw attention away from Rebecca's quieter departure. His plan worked, perhaps too well. As he pulled onto the main road, he glanced in his rear view mirror to see the white van emerging from the dirt path, turning to follow him. Whoever these people were, they were now focused entirely on him, giving Rebecca and Ranger the chance they needed to escape. Jack pressed the accelerator, his truck lurching forward along the winding road that circled Sebago Lake. The van stayed close behind, closer than Jack would have liked. He had no illusions about what would happen if they caught him. The evidence on that drive threatened powerful people who had already shown they were willing to go to extreme lengths to protect their secrets. As the chase continued, Jack could only hope that Rebecca and Ranger would make it safely to Nathan, that the evidence would reach the right hands, and that the truth, whatever it might cost him personally, would finally come to light. The Tazist white van stayed relentlessly on Jack's tail as he navigated the winding roads around Sebago Lake. His old Ford truck, reliable as it was, couldn't outrun the newer vehicle. Jack needed strategy, not speed. He knew these roads well. 15 years of weekend fishing trips had made this area as familiar as his own neighborhood. There was a logging trail about 2 miles ahead that branched off the main road, barely visible unless you knew exactly where to look. Jack kept checking his rearview mirror. The van maintained a steady distance, not attempting to close the gap, but never falling behind either. These weren't amateurs. Their pursuit was calculated, patient, which made them all the more dangerous. When he reached the nearly hidden turnoff, Jack waited until the last possible moment before wrenching the steering wheel hard to the right. The truck protested, tires skidding on loose gravel, but held the turn. The logging road was rough, pitted with holes and crossed by exposed tree roots, but Jack's truck was built for this terrain. The van driver hesitated, nearly missing the turn, then followed. Jack smiled grimly. The narrow path ahead split multiple times, creating a maze through the dense forest. Local knowledge would be his advantage. After a series of quick turns, designed to confuse his pursuers, Jack cut the engine and lights, pulling behind a dense thicket of pine trees. He sat perfectly still, barely breathing as the white van rumbled past his hiding spot, continuing down the wrong path. Once the sound of their engine faded, Jack allowed himself a moment of relief. He'd bought some time, but he wasn't out of danger yet. Pulling out the burner phone Rebecca had given him, he dialed her number. "Where are you?" she answered immediately. "Lost them in the woods near the lake," Jack replied quietly. "For now, at least. Where are you and Ranger?" "About 20 miles south. Ranger's fine but restless. He misses you." Jack could picture the loyal dog, confused by the separation. "Keep heading toward the meeting point. I'll find another route and meet you there." "Jack," Rebecca's voice became urgent. "There's something else. I've been going through more files on the drive. There's information about internal affairs investigations, ones that were started but mysteriously shut down. One name keeps appearing, Lieutenant Sandra Hayes." Jack froze. Lieutenant Hayes was the head of internal affairs, responsible for investigating corruption within the department. She had always seemed uncompromising, a by-the-book officer with an impeccable record. "Hayes, you think she's involved?" "Either involved or targeted. The files suggest she began several investigations into the closed cases we saw, but each one was suddenly terminated. The last entry mentions her being neutralized." A chill ran down Jack's spine. "Neutralized? What does that mean?" "I don't know," Rebecca admitted. "But Jack, she went on medical leave 3 months ago. No one's heard from her since." Jack's mind raced through possibilities, none of them good. Hayes had always been a crusader against departmental corruption. If she had discovered what was happening with these cases and tried to investigate. "We need to find her," Jack decided. "She might be the one who planted the drive on Ranger, or at least know who did." "How? We don't even know where she is." Jack thought for a moment. "Check her personnel file on that drive. There might be something, an address, emergency contact, anything." The line went quiet as Rebecca searched. Jack used the moment to restart his truck and carefully navigate back to the main road, taking a different route than the one his pursuers had followed. "I found something," Rebecca finally said. "Her emergency contact is listed as a sister, Elaine Hayes. There's an address in Camden." Camden was a coastal town, about an hour's drive northeast, in the opposite direction from their planned meeting with Nathan. "Change of plans," Jack said. "We need to check this out first. Hayes might be our whistleblower, and if she is, she's in danger." "What about Nathan? He's expecting us." "Call him. Explain we're following a lead and will be delayed. If Hayes is behind this, she might have critical information that could help us understand exactly what we're dealing with." They agreed to meet at a gas station outside Camden in 2 hours. Jack took back roads, avoiding main highways where police might be looking for him. The sun was beginning to set, casting long shadows across the main countryside by the time he reached The rendezvous point. Rebecca was already there, parked at the far end of the lot. Ranger bounded out of her car the moment Jack pulled up, jumping into his arms with enthusiastic whines. "Hey, buddy," Jack murmured, burying his face in the dog's fur. "Missed you too." Rebecca approached, her expression a mix of relief and concern. No sign of pursuit, but the news is getting worse. She handed him her phone, showing a news alert. "Wanted former officer Jack Miller, accused of theft and assault, considered armed and dangerous." "Former officer," Jack read in disbelief. "They've already fired me." "Administrative leave pending investigation is the official line," Rebecca said grimly. "They're moving fast to discredit you." Jack returned her phone, a new determination, hardening his features. "Then we need to move faster. Where's this address in Camden?" The Hayes sisters' home turned out to be a modest Cape Cod-style house on a quiet street overlooking Penobscot Bay. No lights shone from within, but a car was parked in the driveway. "Let me go," Rebecca suggested. "You're too recognizable now, and Ranger would draw attention." Jack reluctantly agreed. He watched from the truck as Rebecca approached the house and knocked on the door. After a brief conversation with someone inside, she was admitted. 10 long minutes passed before she emerged again, accompanied by a slender woman with silver-streaked hair. They both walked directly to Jack's truck. "This is Elaine," Rebecca said as Jack rolled down his window. "She says Sandra is here and she wants to talk to you." The interior of the Hayes home was cozy but sparse, suggesting it wasn't a primary residence, but rather a vacation home or occasional retreat. Lieutenant Sandra Hayes sat in an armchair by the fireplace, a blanket over her legs despite the mild evening temperature. She looked thinner than Jack remembered, her once sharp eyes now shadowed with exhaustion. "Miller," she greeted him with a nod. "I was wondering when someone would follow the breadcrumbs." Jack studied her carefully. "You left the drive on Ranger." It wasn't a question, but Hayes nodded anyway. "Not personally. I had help from someone still inside." She gestured to a chair across from her. "You should sit. This is going to take some explaining." As Elaine prepared tea in the kitchen and Rebecca kept watch by the window with Ranger at her side, Hayes told her story. "I started noticing patterns 8 months ago. Major cases involving wealthy defendants suddenly closed without explanation. Evidence misplaced, witnesses changing statements. At first I thought it was just incompetence or bad luck." She paused, her hands trembling slightly as she reached for a glass of water. "Then I found financial irregularities. Offshore accounts opened in the names of several high-ranking officers. Deposits that coincided with cases being dismissed. I opened official investigations, followed protocol." A bitter smile crossed her face. "That was my mistake." "What happened?" Jack asked, though he was beginning to piece it together. "I was called to a meeting with Chief Wilson. He told me my concerns were noted, but that I was working too hard, seeing conspiracies where there were only coincidences. A week later, my brakes failed on Route 1. Jack's jaw tightened. "The accident that put you on medical leave?" Hayes nodded. "The official investigation called it mechanical failure, but I know what happened." She leaned forward, her voice dropping. "They tried to silence me, Miller. When that didn't work, they isolated me, spread rumors that the accident had affected my mental stability, that I was paranoid, unstable. So you went underground," Rebecca said from her position by the window, "and started collecting evidence." "With help," Hayes confirmed. "There are still good people in the department, people who see what's happening." One of them had access to the K9 unit. Officer Chen, Jack realized suddenly. He was the first to respond when Ranger went missing. He must have taken him temporarily, planted the drive, then left him at Eastern Disposal to be found. The plan was for Chen to retrieve Ranger himself, claim he'd found him wandering, and return him to you none the wiser, Hayes explained. Then you'd go about your normal routine, including the weekly visit to the FBI field office with evidence reports. Jack nodded, understanding now. The Portland PD regularly coordinated with the FBI on certain cases, and K-9 handlers often transported sensitive materials because of their security clearance. Ranger's vest would have passed through security without raising any flags. But something went wrong, he said. Chen was pulled into an unexpected assignment. By the time he could get back to retrieve Ranger, you were already searching. The plan had to change. Jack processed this information, his worldview shifting with each revelation. People he had trusted for years were corrupt. Others he barely. A new had been fighting from the shadows. The evidence on that drive, he finally said. Is it enough? Can it bring down the corruption? Hayes met his gaze steadily. If it reaches the right people, yes. But these aren't just dirty cops we're dealing with, Miller. The corruption extends to judges, prosecutors, even some state officials. They have resources, influence, and they're desperate. As if to emphasize her point, Elaine's phone rang suddenly. The room fell silent as she answered, her expression quickly changing to alarm. They just showed footage of your truck on the news, she said, hanging up. A friend recognized it. They know you're in Camden. Hayes struggled to her feet. You need to go now. Take the evidence to Nathan Reeves. I know him, he's solid. But don't use your phones again. They're likely tracking them. What about you? Jack asked, concerned about leaving the lieutenant behind. I'll be fine, she assured him. I've been officially unstable for months now. No one takes me seriously. Anymore, it's my best protection. She turned to her sister. We'll move to the cottage on Deer Isle tonight, just to be safe. Outside, the night had fully descended, providing some cover as they prepared to leave. Jack helped Hayes copy additional files she had kept hidden in her sister's home, adding them to the drive. There's one more thing you should know, Hayes said as they stood by his truck. Watch out for Captain Donovan. She's been Wilson's right hand in all of this. The revelation hit Jack like a physical blow. Sarah Donovan had been his friend, or so he'd thought, for 20 years. They'd come up through the ranks together. He'd trusted her completely. Are you sure? His voice was barely audible. Hayes nodded grimly. I'm sorry. She's been coordinating the cover-ups, making sure problematic officers are reassigned or discredited. She's the one who likely issued the APB on you. Jack absorbed this final betrayal in silence. Then he straightened his shoulders. Determination, replacing shock. Thank you for everything, Lieutenant. We'll make sure your work wasn't in vain. As they drove away from the Hayes residence, Jack glanced at Rebecca in the passenger seat, Ranger alert between them. I can't believe Sarah's involved, he finally said. Rebecca reached over to squeeze his hand. People aren't always who we think they are, but some are exactly who we hope they'll be. She smiled slightly at Ranger, who remained steadfastly loyal despite everything. The road ahead was dark, their future uncertain. But one thing was clear, they now knew who their enemies were, and they had the evidence to bring them down. All they needed to do was stay alive long enough to deliver it. As they approached the interstate that would take them toward Boston, and their meeting with Nathan, Jack's phone, the one they'd been warned not to use, buzzed with a text message. Against his better judgment, he asked Rebecca to check it. It's from Sarah, she said, her voice tight. She says she knows you have Ranger in the drive. She wants to meet, alone, says she can explain everything. Jack's hands tightened on the steering wheel. She's trying to trap us. Or, Rebecca said carefully, she knows we've discovered her involvement and is trying to do damage control. Or there's another explanation entirely, Jack mused, an idea forming. What if we use this? Set up a meeting, but on our terms? Rebecca looked skeptical. That's incredibly risky. So is trying to outrun an entire police department while labeled a fugitive, Jack countered. If we can get Sarah to admit something, on record, it strengthens our case. It was a dangerous gamble, but they were running out of options and time. The noose was tightening around them with each passing hour. "Let me think about how to play this," Jack said, taking the next exit, toward a 24-hour truck stop where they could regroup and plan. "Sarah thinks she knows me, thinks she can manipulate me, but she doesn't know what I know now." As they pulled into the brightly lit parking lot, Jack felt Ranger press against his leg, a solid, reassuring presence. Whatever came next, they would face it together. The man, the woman, and the loyal dog who had unwittingly carried the weight of truth through the darkness of corruption. The truck stop buzzed with late-night activity. Long-haul drivers grabbing coffee, travelers stretching their legs, all oblivious to the three fugitives planning their next move in a corner booth. "We need to be smart about this," Jack said, keeping his voice low as he scratched behind Ranger's ears. The dog lay under the table, vigilant despite his exhaustion. "Sarah thinks she's holding all the cards." Rebecca nodded, stirring her untouched coffee. "So we flip the script. Make her think she's getting what she wants." "Exactly." Jack pulled out a napkin and began sketching a rough map. She suggested meeting at Harborview Park, isolated enough at night but still public. Multiple entry points, which works both for and against us. "It's also within sight of the precinct," Rebecca pointed out. "She could have backup nearby without raising suspicion." Jack considered this. "We need insurance. Something to insure. She comes alone and actually talks." They fell silent, weighing options. It was Ranger's sudden alertness, his ears perking up at something only he could sense, that gave Jack an idea. "The drive isn't the only copy, is it?" he asked Hayes before they left. "You'd never risk everything on a single storage device." Rebecca's eyes widened with understanding. "We tell Sarah we've already sent copies to multiple recipients, timed emails set to deliver automatically if we don't return to stop them." "Dead man's switch," Jack nodded. "She can't risk taking us in without hearing us out first." With their strategy forming, Jack composed a careful response to Sarah's message, suggesting a meeting at Harborview Park at midnight, but on his terms. No backup, no weapons, just talk. He knew she wouldn't honor the agreement completely, but it would limit how far she could escalate without explanation. After sending the message, they spent the next hour meticulously preparing. Rebecca used the truck stop's spotty Wi-Fi to actually create what they'd bluffed about, encrypted emails containing portions of the evidence scheduled to send to several news outlets and FBI contacts, if not cancelled. "Insurance policy activated," she confirmed. "Now we genuinely have leverage." At 11:30 p.m., they arrived near Harborview Park, parking several blocks away as a precaution. Jack left Ranger with Rebecca in a concealed position overlooking the meeting point, a bench near the park's central fountain, visible from multiple angles but difficult to approach unseen. "If anything feels wrong, leave immediately," Jack instructed, securing a wireless microphone to his collar. Rebecca would record everything from her position. "Get Ranger and the evidence to Nathan no matter what." Rebecca caught his arm before he could leave. "Jack, be careful. Sarah's known you for 20 years. She knows how you think." "Not anymore," Jack replied grimly. The Jack Miller she knew wouldn't be capable of suspecting his closest colleagues of corruption. That Jack died when Ranger disappeared. The night air carried the scent of salt water as Jack approached the meeting spot. The park was deserted, the only sounds being the gentle splash of the fountain and distant harbor bells. He arrived 5 minutes early, positioning himself on the bench with a clear view of all approaching paths. At exactly midnight, Sarah emerged from the shadows. She wore civilian clothes, jeans and a dark jacket, but Jack knew she'd be armed. 20 years in law enforcement taught you never to take unnecessary risks. "Jack," she greeted him, her voice neutral as she stopped several feet away. "You've caused quite a stir." "That wasn't my intention," he replied evenly. "All I wanted was to find my partner." Sarah's gaze swept the area, looking for signs of Ranger or Rebecca. "Where is he? And the drive you took from his vest?" "Safe," Jack said, "both of them. The question is, why do you care so much about a piece of hardware?" Sarah sighed, taking a seat beside him on the bench, maintaining a cautious distance. "You don't understand what you've stumbled into, Jack. Enlighten me," he challenged. "Explain why my dog was kidnapped, why evidence was planted on him, why I'm suddenly a wanted man." Sarah studied him for a long moment. "You really don't know, do you? You think this is some simple case of departmental corruption?" She laughed quietly, but there was no humor in it. "It's so much bigger than that." "I know enough," Jack countered. "I know about the offshore accounts, the buried cases, the neutralization of Lieutenant Hayes." At the mention of Hayes, Sarah's expression hardened. Sandra Hayes was a problem. She couldn't see the bigger picture. And what picture is that? Accepting bribes to let criminals walk free? "Protection," Sarah snapped. "Protection for the city, for the department, for officers like you who just want to do their jobs without being caught in political crossfires." Jack fought to keep his expression neutral, aware of the microphone recording every word. "Explain." Sarah leaned back, suddenly looking tired. 3 years ago, the mayor launched a secret initiative to clean up the city's image. Not by actually addressing crime or poverty, but by making certain problems disappear from the statistics. High-profile cases against donors and friends got buried. Investigations that might reflect poorly on the administration were redirected. Barr and the department went along with this. Some did. Others needed incentives. The smart ones realized fighting it was futile. "So you became part of it," Jack said, unable to keep the disappointment from his voice. Sarah's eyes flashed. "I protected what mattered. Do you know what happens to officers who stand up against this system? They get transferred to desk jobs in forgotten precincts. Their promotions vanish. Their pensions get reviewed. I made sure our people were taken care of. By taking bribes. By playing the game," she corrected. "The money ensured cooperation and silence. It protected families, futures." Jack shook his head, disgust rising within him. "You betrayed everything the badge stands for." "Don't be naive," Sarah snapped. "The badge stands for whatever those in power say it does, always has. I just made sure our people got something out of it instead of being sacrificed." "And Hayes? What happened to her wasn't protection." Sarah's expression darkened. "Hayes wouldn't back down. She threatened everything. The accident was regrettable but necessary." Jack felt sick. This woman had been his mentor, his friend. "And Ranger, using my partner to smuggle your dirty secrets." "That wasn't us," Sarah said, surprising him. "Someone in the department has been collecting evidence, building a case against the arrangement. They used Ranger because he could pass security checks without suspicion." Her eyes narrowed. "When we discovered what was happening, we tried to intercept the drive before it reached its destination." The pieces suddenly clicked together in Jack's mind. "Hayes," he said. "She was working with someone inside, using Ranger to get evidence to the FBI." Sarah's silence confirmed his theory. "But your people found Ranger first," Jack continued. "Took the drive, realized what it contained, then panicked when I started looking for him, dumped him at Eastern Disposal hoping he'd never be found." "It wasn't personal, Jack," Sarah said, her voice softening. "You were never supposed to be involved. If you had just followed protocol, let the department handle the search." "You mean if I had given up on my partner?" Jack corrected coldly. Sarah sighed. "And now here we are. You with evidence that could bring down half the city's leadership, me trying to contain the damage." She leaned forward. "It's not too late, Jack. Give me the drive. Tell me who else knows about this. We can make this right. Get you reinstated. Clear your record." Jack studied her, This woman he'd trusted with his life countless times. And if I refuse? Sarah's expression hardened again. Don't test me, Jack. You're already facing serious charges. That can get much worse very quickly, and not just for you. Her implication was clear. Rebecca would suffer too. Before Jack could respond, Ranger's distinctive bark cut through the night, their warning signal. Sarah immediately tensed, her hand moving toward what Jack assumed was a concealed weapon. "You brought backup," Jack accused, rising slowly from the bench. "So did you," Sarah countered, standing as well. "Did you really think I'd come alone?" "There are officers positioned throughout the park. One signal from me, and they move in." Jack maintained a calm exterior, but inwardly he was calculating escape routes. Those officers, do they know why they're really here? Or did you feed them the same story about me being dangerous, unstable? Doubt flickered briefly across Sarah's face. "They follow orders, Jack, just like you used to." Before I knew what those orders really meant, Jack took a deliberate step back. "This conversation is over. You've said enough." Sarah's expression hardened. "You're not walking away from this, Jack. The drive now." "It's not here," Jack replied truthfully. "And before you get any ideas about forcing the location out of me, you should know that everything, including this entire conversation, has already been backed up and set to release automatically if anything happens to me or Rebecca." Sarah's face paled slightly. "You're bluffing." "Try me," Jack challenged. "How do you think the mayor will react when the public hears his police department has been burying cases for bribes? When they learn that an internal affairs lieutenant was nearly killed for investigating, your arrangement won't survive daylight, Sarah." For a tense moment, they stared at each other. Decades of friendship dissolved into adversarial calculation. Then Sarah took a step back. "This isn't over," she warned. "It is for tonight," Jack replied firmly. As Jack backed away toward his exit route, never taking his eyes off Sarah, he felt, rather than saw, movement in his peripheral vision, officers closing in, just as she'd warned. "Those officers," Jack called out, loud enough to carry across the park, "might want to know they're being recorded right now." Every word, Sarah, every admission, every threat. He saw uncertainty ripple through the shadowy figures moving among the trees. Doubt was a powerful weapon against blind obedience. Jack used that moment of hesitation to slip away into the darkness, navigating the park's winding paths with practiced ease. He heard Sarah barking orders, but the pursuit was disorganized, confused by their leader's suddenly erratic behavior. Jack reached the rendezvous point where Rebecca waited with Ranger, both alert and ready to move. "Did you get it?" he asked, breathlessly. Rebecca held up her phone with the recording app still running. Every damning word. She implicated herself, the chief, even the mayor. Her eyes were wide with the implications. "This goes higher than we thought. We need to move," Jack urged, keenly aware of distant shouts as Sarah organized her forces. "They'll lock down the area soon." They slipped through back streets and narrow alleys, Ranger leading the way with his superior senses alerting them to approaching danger. The city felt different now, every shadow potentially hostile, every passing car a threat. 2 hours later, they crossed into New Hampshire, putting meaningful distance between themselves and Portland. Jack drove, while Rebecca made contact with Nathan Reeves using one of their burner phones. "He's going to meet us at the safe house in 3 hours, she reported after hanging up. "He's bringing a trusted FBI team with him. No locals, no potential. Leaks back to Portland." Jack nodded, relief beginning to temper his hypervigilance. "Did you send him samples of what we have?" "Enough to convince him it's legitimate," Rebecca confirmed. "He sounded shocked, said this case could rock law enforcement across the entire state." They drove in silence for a while, the weight of what they'd uncovered settling around them. Ranger had fallen asleep in the back seat, finally relaxed now that they were together and moving away from danger. "What happens after?" Rebecca finally asked, voicing the question that had been hovering unspoken between them. After we hand everything over to the FBI? Jack had been pondering the same question. His career in Portland was over, regardless of how this played out. Even if vindicated, the department would never be the same for him. I don't know, he admitted. Find somewhere quiet, maybe, somewhere Ranger can run without a vest for a while. Rebecca smiled, reaching over to squeeze his hand. Room for one more in that plan? Jack felt warmth spread through him despite everything. Definitely. The safe house turned out to be a remote cabin owned by the Bureau, positioned on a wooded hillside with clear sightlines in all directions, perfect for security, Nathan had explained when they arrived. By dawn, the cabin was buzzing with activity as Nathan's team processed the evidence and recorded formal statements. Jack watched from the porch as the sun rose over the trees, Ranger at his feet. Rebecca joined them, carrying 3 mugs of coffee. Nathan says they're moving on the warrants today, she said, handing Jack a steaming mug. By nightfall, Sarah, the chief, and at least a dozen others will be in custody. Jack nodded, absorbing the news. It should have felt like victory, but instead, he felt a complicated mix of vindication and sadness. These were people he'd worked with for years, trusted implicitly. Lieutenant Hayes is being brought in for protection, Rebecca continued. Her testimony will be crucial. And Chen, the officer who helped her, protected as well. Nathan says they're building an airtight case. With the recording from last night, the financial records, and Hayes' testimony, it's overwhelming. Jack scratched Ranger behind the ears, watching as the dog leaned into his touch with complete trust. You know what still bothers me? Sarah genuinely believed she was protecting the department. She couldn't see how corrupted her thinking had become. Rebecca leaned against the porch railing. People can justify anything if they convince themselves it's for a greater good. And the real good gets lost in the process, Jack agreed. Nathan joined them on the porch, looking tired but satisfied. It's done, he announced. The first arrests are happening as we speak. Jack, I want you to know, this is big. What you've uncovered, what you risked to bring this forward, it matters. Jack nodded, feeling a sense of closure beginning to form. What about us? What happens now? Witness protection is an option, Nathan said seriously. At least until the trials are over. These people have resources, connections outside the department. Jack looked at Rebecca, then down at Ranger, who gazed back with unwavering loyalty. The thought of going into hiding, changing their identities, starting over completely, it was daunting. But they had already crossed the point of no return the moment Jack had refused to give up searching for his partner. Whatever it takes, Jack decided, as long as we stay together. As if understanding, Ranger pressed closer to Jack's leg, a silent affirmation of their bond. Through disappearance and discovery, betrayal and revelation, that connection had remained unbroken and had ultimately exposed a truth that might otherwise have remained buried. Nathan nodded, respect evident in his expression. I'll make the arrangements. For what it's worth, Jack, I think you're making the right choice. Sometimes the hardest path is the only one that leads forward. As Nathan returned inside, Jack, Rebecca, and Ranger remained on the porch, watching the sun climb higher in the sky. The future was uncertain, filled with challenges and changes they couldn't yet imagine. But for the first time since Ranger had disappeared around that fateful corner, Jack felt something he had almost forgotten: hope. Rebecca's hand found his, her fingers intertwining with his own. Ready for whatever comes next? Jack smiled, feeling Ranger's reassuring presence against his leg and Rebecca's hand warm in his. The path ahead was unknown, but he wouldn't be walking it alone. Together, he said simply. We face it together. And as the morning light strengthened, illuminating the 3 figures on the porch, man, woman, and loyal dog, it seemed to promise that even after the darkest night, dawn always returns, bringing with it the chance for justice, redemption, and new beginnings. Dear listeners, we hope Jack and Ranger's journey of loyalty and courage has touched your hearts. Their story reminds us that sometimes the strongest bonds are formed in silence, through unwavering commitment and trust. If you enjoyed this emotional tale, we've prepared a special playlist with equally captivating stories about partnerships that transcend words. Find it by clicking to your left. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel and give this video a thumbs up. Every day, we bring you unique stories that explore life's complexities and the unbreakable connections we form with others. What would you have done in Jack's position? Would you risk everything for a loyal companion? Share your thoughts in the comments below. We're waiting to hear from you.